The Galactic Council chamber was a place of power, a grand hall filled with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. They sat in their elevated seats, each with their own unique physiology, some towering over others, some with tentacles or scaled skin, all projecting an air of superiority. To them, this was just another diplomatic formality, another species to placate or dismiss. But when the human diplomat entered the room, the mood shifted ever so slightly. Ambassador Reynolds was not what they expected. He was calm, composed, wearing the dark, formal attire of Earth's diplomatic corps. He wasn't intimidated by the grandeur of the council or the multitude of eyes trained on him. In fact, he moved with a quiet confidence that unsettled many of the gathered species. He stepped forward to the center of the room, where a holographic projector hummed silently. The council members leaned in slightly, curious about what this human had to say. They had heard about the skirmish, but to them, it was nothing more than an unfortunate accident, a misunderstanding that could be brushed aside. After all, humanity was young on the galactic stage, and surely they wouldn't press the issue too hard. Reynolds stood there in silence for a moment, letting the tension grow. His gaze swept over the council, taking in the various faces, expressions, and forms. Some were indifferent, others curious, but none seemed to take him seriously. He was about to change that. "You attacked our home?" The room went silent. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the chamber. Some of the council members shifted uncomfortably, while others looked around, unsure if they had heard him correctly. One of the alien representatives, a hulking creature with dark, leathery skin, scoffed. "Your home? Our intelligence suggests it was an outpost, a minor colony at best." Reynolds didn't flinch. He simply looked up at the towering figure and said, "It wasn't a colony. It was Earth." A murmur spread through the council. Earth? The homeworld? The implications were enormous. They had believed it was just another remote outpost, not humanity's heart. Now the gravity of the situation began to sink in, and the council chamber grew colder. "Earth is not some distant colony you can destroy and ignore," Reynolds continued, his voice steady, but with a subtle edge. "We know the attack wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. You thought you could strike at us and face no consequences. You believed we were weak, divided, insignificant. You were wrong." The council, still reeling from the revelation, tried to regain control of the situation. One of the more diplomatic species, with shimmering blue skin and a smooth, melodic voice, spoke up. "Ambassador, surely there's been some misunderstanding. No one here would authorize an attack on a core world. This must be the work of rogue elements." Reynolds cut him off. "Rogue elements or not, it happened. And now we're here to deal with it." The blue-skinned diplomat paused, thrown off by Reynolds' directness. There was no bluster, no posturing, just cold, hard truth. It was unsettling. The Galactic Council was used to lengthy negotiations, bargaining, and diplomacy. But humanity had come to the table with a different approach. One of the other council members, a reptilian creature with sharp, predatory features, leaned forward. "What exactly do you expect, human? Recompense? Apology? We do not bow to the weak." Reynolds met the alien's predatory gaze without flinching. "You may not bow, but you will answer for what was done." A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. The council wasn't used to being challenged like this. Other species would have groveled, begged for peace, or at least tried to maneuver for better terms. But Reynolds wasn't doing that. He wasn't here to negotiate, he was here to make demands. Another council member, a being with multiple eyes and long, spindly limbs, chimed in. "You speak as if your people have the means to enforce these demands. I find that unlikely, given your current position in the galactic hierarchy." Reynolds smirked, the first hint of emotion he had shown since entering the chamber. "You think you know humanity's position. You think you understand our capabilities. But what you fail to realize is that humans don't show their hand until it's too late for their enemies to act." More murmurs spread through the chamber. The council members exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with how this meeting was unfolding. They had expected a weak, desperate ambassador. What they had instead was someone who seemed to hold all the cards, someone who spoke with the confidence of a species that had been underestimated for far too long. Reynolds continued, his voice calm but with a weight that hung in the air. We've been watching, learning, adapting. You think you're dealing with a minor threat, something you can swat away like an insect. But every time humanity has faced extinction, we've come back stronger. Every war, every crisis, every catastrophe, each one has only forged us into something more formidable. The room fell silent once again. The council, once so confident, was beginning to realize they had made a grave miscalculation. They had pushed humanity too far, and now, they were facing the consequences. One of the elder council members, a being with a smooth, crystalline body and an air of ancient wisdom, finally spoke. What is it that you seek, Ambassador Reynolds? Reynolds' eyes locked onto the elder beings, and for the first time, there was a flicker of emotion, resolve. Justice. For the lives lost. For the home you thought you could destroy without consequence. And for the message that must be sent to anyone else who thinks they can threaten humanity. The elder being nodded slowly, understanding dawning in its crystalline features. And what if we refuse? Reynolds didn't hesitate. Then we'll show you what happens when humans are pushed to the brink. With that, he turned on his heel and walked out of the chamber, leaving the council in stunned silence. The door closed behind him, and the weight of what had just transpired hung heavy in the air. The council was no longer sure who had the upper hand, and for the first time in a long time, they feared what was coming next. The humans had come to the council not to negotiate, but to deliver a warning. And the galaxy would soon learn just how dangerous it was to underestimate them. The council chamber was buzzing after Reynolds' departure. They hadn't expected such a bold move from humanity, a species they had long considered beneath their attention. The representatives sat in their respective sections, exchanging worried glances and hushed discussions. The implications were huge. If the humans were telling the truth, the galactic power dynamics were about to shift. One of the senior members, the crystalline elder, spoke first. We need to understand more about what the humans are truly capable of. Are they bluffing, or do they possess the strength to carry out these threats? There was a pause, and then one of the more technologically advanced species, the Arcorians, spoke up. They had long been the galaxy's undisputed masters of innovation. We've studied their progress since they first entered space. Their technology is basic, primitive compared to ours. However, there have been strange reports in recent cycles, rumors of human advancements we can't explain. Another member, from a race known for their military prowess, interjected. Advancements? We've monitored their ships, their colonies. Yes, they've grown, but nothing that would indicate they could stand against us in a direct confrontation. The Arcorians shook their heads. That's the thing. Their growth isn't what we expected. In just a few decades, they've made leaps that should have taken them centuries. It's almost as if they're evolving too fast, adapting to every challenge with a speed that's unnatural. The crystalline elder tapped a smooth finger against the table. Unnatural, or just efficient? Humans have always been survivors. We've seen it in their history. Every time they've been pushed to the edge of extinction, they find a way to not just survive, but thrive. The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. They had dismissed humanity as young, naive, and weak, but now they were forced to confront the idea that they might have underestimated them entirely. The Arcorians continued, pulling up data on their holographic displays. Their technology may have seemed primitive, but they've been advancing in ways we can't quite understand. We've seen reports of new ship designs, experimental weapons, and defense systems. And they've been remarkably secretive about it, more than usual. The predatory council member from earlier leaned forward. They're hiding something, then. Perhaps it's time we force the issue. The elder raised a hand. No. If what they say is true, and they're mobilizing for war, pushing them now would be a mistake. We need to understand their capabilities before we act. The room buzzed with agreement. Pushing humanity too soon could backfire, and they were all aware of the consequences. No one wanted to ignite a full-scale galactic conflict, not without knowing what the humans could truly do. Another representative, from a race known for its psychic abilities, spoke quietly. I've been monitoring their collective thoughts, at least what little we've been able to access from this distance. The humans aren't afraid. They're determined. Focused. It's unlike anything we've seen before. The elder tilted its head. Determined for what? Vengeance, the psychic whispered. They're not coming here to negotiate. They're coming to win. The council was silent once again. The psychic's words echoed in their minds, painting a chilling picture of humanity's intent. They weren't just reacting to an attack. They were preparing to make an example out of those who had wronged them. The Arcorians adjusted their holographic displays again, showing the latest intel on human movements. Their fleets are mobilizing. We've detected increased activity near their home system. If they're planning a counterstrike, we could be seeing the beginning stages right now. The military representative snorted. And what exactly do you think they'll do? Take on the entire Galactic fleet? They may be determined, but they don't have the numbers. The Arcorians hesitated. Numbers aren't everything. We've seen their combat strategies. They're clever, adaptive. They don't fight like the rest of us. They use guerrilla tactics, exploiting weaknesses. And they're unpredictable. That's what makes them dangerous. The elder leaned back, considering. So they're not to be underestimated. No, the Arcorians confirmed. Underestimating them would be a fatal mistake. The elder shifted its gaze across the council members, each lost in thought. Then we must prepare ourselves. If the humans are truly as capable as they claim, this won't be a simple negotiation. We're dealing with a species that has survived through endless conflict. They've learned from it, adapted to it. They've become stronger because of it. The military representative, still skeptical, crossed their arms. So what are you suggesting? We let them make the next move and hope they don't wipe us out? The elder was silent for a moment. No. We need to reach out, but cautiously. We need to gather more information on their capabilities before we can determine our next steps. The psychic representative added. And we need to understand their mindset. If vengeance is truly driving them, diplomacy may not be an option. The Arcorians leaned forward, the glow of their holographic screens casting eerie light on their faces. We've underestimated them before. We can't afford to do it again. We need a plan, a strategy to deal with what's coming. And we need to prepare for the worst. The council murmured in agreement. They had misjudged humanity before, and now they were paying the price. They had thought they could control the situation, manipulate the humans into submission. But now, it was clear that humanity was not the weak, naive species they had believed. The elder spoke one final time, their voice heavy with the weight of the situation. We will gather our forces, but not to attack. We must defend. We will learn what we can, prepare for what may come, and hope that diplomacy is still an option. But make no mistake, the humans are no longer to be taken lightly. The council members nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The meeting ended in uneasy silence, each representative returning to their homeworlds with a new sense of dread. They had awakened a sleeping giant, and now, they had to face the consequences. As they departed, one thought lingered in the minds of every council member. Humanity had been underestimated for the last time. The council's deliberations continued for hours after the human diplomat's departure. Their discussions, once confident and dismissive, now carried an undercurrent of fear. The situation had shifted. No longer was this just about a misunderstanding or a minor skirmish. Humanity had declared its intention, and it was clear they would follow through. The council members, once dismissive, now grappled with the reality of what was coming. As reports filtered in from the outer sectors, it became evident that the humans had not been idle. The first sign of their counteroffensive was subtle, small skirmishes in sectors far from Earth's core. But these weren't random attacks. Every move the humans made was calculated, precise. They hit supply lines, communication hubs, and key outposts, disrupting the logistics of several major species who had supported the initial assault. At first, the Council couldn't believe the reports. How could humanity, with its comparatively small fleet, wreak such havoc. But then the details started to emerge. The humans had been planning this for some time. They weren't relying on brute strength but on strategy, adaptability, and technology the Council had severely underestimated. Human ships were fast, nimble, and outfitted with advanced stealth systems that made them nearly invisible to standard detection. They would strike from nowhere, dismantling critical infrastructure before disappearing back into the void. By the time reinforcements arrived, it was already too late. The damage had been done. One of the Council's military advisors, a grizzled veteran of countless galactic conflicts, analyzed the human tactics with a mix of admiration and fear. "They're using their size to their advantage. They're not trying to win a traditional war, they know they can't outgun us head-on. Instead, they're bleeding us out slowly. Every supply convoy they destroy, every communication relay they sever, it's all part of a larger strategy." The Council, now fully aware of the threat humanity posed, scrambled to respond. Fleets were dispatched to key sectors, defensive perimeters were tightened, and intelligence operations were ramped up to try and track human movements. But the humans had prepared for this as well. They knew the Council's every move before it was made, exploiting the bureaucratic inefficiencies and overconfidence of their alien foes. Then came the first major blow. A human fleet appeared out of nowhere, deep in Council-controlled space. It wasn't a massive armada, just a small strike group, seemingly insignificant compared to the galactic powers. But what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in precision. They struck one of the Council's largest shipyards, crippling production of warships for several key species. The attack was brutal and swift. The human ships employed advanced electronic warfare, scrambling the shipyard's defenses long enough to get in close and wreak havoc. By the time the defenders managed to mount a response, the damage had already been done. Fires raged across the shipyard, and critical production lines had been destroyed. The Council had lost months, if not years, of military production in a single, coordinated strike. The aftermath sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Humanity had just proven they weren't a minor threat to be contained, they were a force to be reckoned with. The Council's attempts to track human movements became increasingly desperate, but their intelligence efforts were continuously thwarted. Human ships seemed to appear and disappear at will, hitting critical targets and vanishing before any real resistance could be mounted. The Council's military leaders were in disarray. They had never faced an enemy like this before. The galactic wars of the past had been fought with massive fleets, long battles of attrition where the side with the most resources ultimately emerged victorious. But this was something different. Humanity wasn't playing by the same rules. They were rewriting the playbook entirely. The predatory alien who had earlier mocked the humans sat in stunned silence during the latest War Council meeting. Even he, a being who thrived on the thrill of combat, had to admit that humanity's approach was terrifying in its efficiency. "They're not fighting us head-on because they don't need to. They're weakening us, one strike at a time. They'll keep this up until we're too weakened to stop them." The elder Council member, usually calm and composed, now showed visible signs of concern. "We need to rethink our strategy. This isn't a war of conquest, it's a war of survival. Humanity doesn't want territory or power. They want to send a message." The Council members exchanged uneasy glances. The realization was sinking in. Humanity wasn't just retaliating, they were teaching the galaxy a lesson. They had been underestimated, ridiculed, and attacked, and now they were showing the galaxy just how wrong it had been to view them as weak. Reports of human successes continued to pour in. They had struck deep into enemy territory, disabling a key communication network that linked several sectors of the Council's territory. Without it, coordination between the Council's fleets became almost impossible. Every response was delayed, every decision muddled by the lack of real-time information. It was chaos, and the humans thrived in it. The Council's attempts to counterattack were met with disaster. The few fleets that managed to find human ships were lured into traps, ambushed by forces they hadn't expected. Human vessels used hit-and-run tactics, baiting larger fleets into engagements only to disappear before the battle could even begin. In the chaos, the Council's forces became scattered, disorganized, and vulnerable. Humanity's campaign of attrition was working. The Council was bleeding resources at an alarming rate. Supply lines were in shambles, key installations had been destroyed, and morale among the galactic powers was at an all-time low. The humans hadn't just outmaneuvered them, they had outthought them. The Elder, now fully aware of the scope of humanity's strategy, finally spoke what many of the Council members had feared. They're not just fighting a war. They're changing the rules. We can't win this by conventional means. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The Council had been brought to its knees, not by overwhelming force, but by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. Humanity had shown the galaxy that it was more than capable of holding its own, even against the combined might of the most powerful species in the universe. As the War Council ended, the Elder looked out over the assembled members, their faces etched with fear and uncertainty. The humans aren't just fighting for themselves anymore. They're fighting to show the galaxy that they will not be underestimated again. And if we don't find a way to stop them soon, we may not survive the lesson they're teaching. The Council disbanded, each member returning to their respective homeworlds, but the tension lingered in the air. The humans had forced the galaxy to reckon with their strength, and the question now wasn't if humanity would win. It was how long the Council could hold out before they did. The Council's options were running out. Their fleets were scattered, their supply lines in ruins, and their morale shattered by humanity's relentless campaign. It wasn't just the military defeats, they could handle losses. But the way the humans fought, the precision and calculation behind every strike, was terrifying. It wasn't about conquering territory or gaining resources. It was about proving a point. Reports from across the galaxy painted the same picture. Wherever humanity struck, they left no doubt about their intentions. They didn't linger or occupy. They hit, crippled their targets, and disappeared before the Council's forces could even comprehend what had happened. Each attack was like a surgical incision, cutting deep into the heart of the Council's infrastructure, weakening them bit by bit. The Council had underestimated humanity's capacity to wage war, not just physically, but mentally. The fear they instilled was paralyzing. What had started as a diplomatic incident had spiraled into a conflict where the very survival of the Council was now in question. And all because they had struck the wrong target. In the midst of the chaos, the Council's leaders gathered once again. The chamber was tense, every member fully aware of the stakes. They had heard nothing from the humans since their ambassador's chilling declaration, but they didn't need words to know what humanity's message was. The attacks were message enough. The Elder spoke first, their voice carrying the weight of the entire galaxy's fears. We have reached a critical point. Our defenses are crumbling, and our fleets are losing cohesion. We cannot continue like this. One of the military commanders, a grizzled veteran of countless battles, slammed their fist on the table. Then we strike back. We gather what's left of our fleets, and we push them out of our territory. The elders shook their head. You still don't understand, do you? This isn't a conventional war. They aren't trying to take territory, and they won't be baited into a head-on conflict. They've been 3 steps ahead of us this entire time. What makes you think we can suddenly outmaneuver them now? The commander fumed but remained silent. The elder was right, and deep down they all knew it. Humanity wasn't playing the same game, and every attempt to engage them had only resulted in more losses. Another representative, one of the more diplomatic races, spoke cautiously. Perhaps it's time we consider their demands. The chamber erupted into murmurs. The idea of negotiating with humanity, a species they had viewed as beneath them, was unthinkable just weeks ago. Now, it seemed like their only option. The predatory alien, who had been so vocal against humanity before, finally spoke, his tone much more subdued than before. What choice do we have? If we continue this fight, we will only weaken ourselves further. They've made their point clear. We attack their home, and they will not stop until we pay for it. The elder nodded slowly. Then we need to decide what we are willing to give. They want justice, reparations for the attack. But it's more than that, they want respect. They want recognition that they are not to be trifled with. the room fell silent again. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but the reality was unavoidable. Humanity had forced their hand, and now they had to decide whether to continue a war they were rapidly losing or to offer terms and hope for the best. The elder continued, their voice steady. We cannot afford to wait any longer. Every moment we delay, they grow stronger, and we grow weaker. I propose we send a delegation to Earth, to negotiate directly with their leaders. There was a pause before the council members reluctantly nodded in agreement. They had no other choice. The elder's proposal was the only option left on the table. The delegation was assembled quickly. They knew time was of the essence. Humanity's fleets were still out there, striking at will, and every day the council delayed, more damage was done. The delegation was made up of representatives from several key species, including the Arcorians, whose technological expertise had earned them a place at the negotiating table, and the predatory race, whose past antagonism toward humanity would need to be addressed. As the delegation prepared to leave for Earth, tension filled the council chamber. Everyone knew that this was a make-or-break moment. If the humans rejected their terms, there would be no coming back from this. The council would be forced to continue a war they couldn't win, and the consequences would be catastrophic. The journey to Earth was uneventful, but the delegation's arrival was anything but. Humanity had made no effort to hide its military strength. As the delegation approached, they could see Earth's defenses, massive orbital platforms, fleets of warships, and an array of weaponry that far surpassed what the Council had expected. It was clear now that humanity had been preparing for this moment long before the Council had even realized there was a conflict. They had been underestimated, and they had used that underestimation to their advantage. The delegation was greeted with cold formality. There was no warmth, no pretense of goodwill. The humans had come to negotiate, but they made it clear from the start that they held all the cards. The delegation was led to a massive chamber where Earth's leaders awaited them, flanked by military officials who made no effort to hide their disdain for the Council. Ambassador Reynolds, the same man who had confronted the Council weeks ago, stood at the forefront of the human delegation. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held the same cold determination they had seen in the Council chamber. He wasn't here to compromise, he was here to ensure humanity's victory, both in war and in reputation. The negotiations were brief. Humanity's terms were simple: reparations for the attack, public acknowledgement of humanity's sovereignty and strength, and assurances that such an attack would never happen again. There was no room for debate. The humans had the upper hand, and they knew it. The Council delegation, humbled and defeated, had no choice but to agree. They had been outmaneuvered at every turn, and now they were paying the price for their arrogance. Humanity had proven itself not only as a military power but as a force that could no longer be ignored. As the delegation left Earth, the weight of their defeat hung heavy in the air. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had risen from the shadows, and the Council knew that they would never again be able to underestimate this once insignificant species. Back in the Council chamber, the Elder received the delegation's report with a grim expression. It was over. The humans had won. But more than that, they had sent a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity was not to be trifled with. They had been attacked, and they had responded with a ferocity and cunning that none had expected. The Council members, once so sure of their superiority, now sat in silence, each contemplating the new reality. Humanity had claimed its place among the stars, not through diplomacy or gradual advancement, but through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance. And as the Elder looked out over the gathered representatives, they knew that the galaxy would never be the same.